Hi, everybody. Monday on Astral Oracles. It's a joy to be with you. I'm going to talk a little about the relationship between personality, energy, and the collective consciousness of all of humankind in this video. And then I'm going to check in a bit with some of our friends from the hybrid program and my Essassani guide, Carlo. But to look into this concept of the collective consciousness, then notice that in our lifetimes, there is an accelerating process of events that transpire that affect the entirety of humanity at once, or at least with a very brief delay. And those were in the past, of course, reserved to ecological disasters. And then that would even be that if there's a volcano in Iceland or um, Indonesia that erupts, then people might experience bad harvests all over the planet, but their frame of reference, of course, doesn't allow them to explain that within a global frame of reference. So, what Marshall McLuhan called the global village, and what he saw very clearly was that the world was turning into a type of nervous system, electronically, technologically, that these ideas about suppressed symbolic content and collective unconsciousness that needs to balance itself out and so instills this in individuals. McLuhan saw very clearly as something that was also taking place on a very, very real haptic level, where the entirety of the world became interconnected into this great unified awareness. And what happens in the Ascension is that these awarenesses, personalities, points of consciousness are embedded within each other. So the Ascension point where we move into the 5D is when the 4D has realized itself as such. So it's come to close the loop and realize that, oh, it turns out I was actually a collective awareness that was doing all of this in separation from itself in order to finally bring it back to the realization of it being one. And then around that, there is some other um, strange to grapple with parameter that we don't understand, that then I then refer to as the sixth dimension. And there are other explorations where we will find that we are embedded within an even greater structure. And they've been saying this for a long time, but that's of course what we are all doing. What all sentience is doing is it's realizing itself as such, and then as it completely identifies with the structure and the structural layer that it's focused in, it moves up and becomes aware of a greater layer of unconsciousness around it. So a classic concept, both in Jungian psychology, but also in New Age at large, is of course the idea of the shadow, which is the repressed or unconscious sides of our subconscious sides of ourselves. But consider that there's also a light body, a luminous self, that is also not accessible to full awareness, and that's also spilling into it in ways that are incomprehensible for the ego, the points of awareness, but that's spilling in. So that's kind of taking the Freudian structure of psychology and then applying that to spirituality, to say that there's actually both, where we are placed also as a soul, a type of layer beneath it and a layer above it. And those are trying to integrate through the expansion of the soul to contain more and more the whole. And that's it seems to me the relationship between the individual souls and the unified oversoul, the totality of the all, the Godhead. So at some point in the far far distant future, or in the high realms, or in the layers of total and complete synchronicity, or within the singularity, there will be a point where consciousness joins hand, all souls join hand, and then sees themselves as the oversoul. But applying this to our sense of who we are, then these events that transpire, that seem to prod the entirety of humanity into new realizations. And well, Fukushima, for instance, is an example, or like the World Wars saw some of the beginning stages of that, and then something like 9/11, for instance, which is uh, also a global event, that's moving and stirring all of the human collective consciousness to try to deal with itself in new ways, because some of the structures that have been alive and stable within it are collapsing, and some new ones are being brought about. And that is incredibly fascinating, how like this great mind that we all belong to is speaking to itself and delivering codes for itself in these odd synchronistic ways. And a thing they were showing me and telling me about 9/11 as I moved through all these epiphanies, was that they began talking to me about JC. And I might possibly be dating myself here, because I was born in 1985, so I was just about to turn 16 when 9/11 happened. And that also means that I kind of grew up in that era of pop music and pop culture. And pop stars, uh, fame in and of itself is kind of this medium that operates as the flow of currencies within this collective consciousness. And a lot of the aspirations people have for fame are actually spiritual aspirations that they've sort of conflated with the idea that they'd like to be seen and be known, because that's a lower fractal of being um, immersed and unified with the oversoul. That is, that if you get to be the person where attention and energy is flowing within the collective consciousness, that can seem like a faux um, type of immortality almost. And it's very interesting that what happens there is that it is the rejected stone that becomes the cornerstone, because it's the unconscious pattern, it's the shadow pattern that has been out and then sort of working in the dark, creating something that was unseen, and therefore is a balance that's added to the whole, that is returned to it. And so for that reason, you'll see, for instance, that the most influential cultural group of people from the 1850 to the 1950 approximately are German speaking European Jews. And that's because they get civil rights with the Napoleonic Code, and all of a sudden gets access to these streams of information where they can um, turn themselves loose on the modern world, and really study and examine it. So of course, like the great ones are Marx, Freud, and Einstein. But that's just simply to name a few. And when we write the history in 2050 of who has been the most influential culture, subculture, on human awareness in the last 100 years, it will be Black Americans. It will be the descendants of American slavery and how they made sense of their experience and struggle through art, through music, through expression. So that's the reality that I grew up in. That's the reality where, like so many uh, Americans who came from a background of not only nothing but of social, of being socially disenfranchised, um, sort of created themselves and appeared as global royalty on the global screen of awareness, like the people like Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan, who were both huge when I grew up, or Oprah Winfrey. And of course, somebody like JC, um, not to mention his wife, but that's another story. Because what happens, and this now it tying together, is the blueprint to, or just the blueprint is the album where JC kind of makes himself the king of New York, and he moves from being a skilled and recognized rapper, but not necessarily more than that, into being this kind of massive hip hop phenomenon. And he does that with an album that's called The Blueprint, and he does, of course, call himself JC. And The Blueprint appears on September 11th, 2001, because he moves it back a week to avoid piracy. And this is the album where the same dude you gave nothing, he made something through it, like that. He like he delivers these just this vision of like what his career is going to be, and there's only one feature on that album, and that is one where him and Eminem, who are both at the top of their careers at that point, and who are both, of course, have this story of being kids from the gutter, that they sort of bring out the best in their respective talents. And the very interesting thing is that it's uh, JC has this architecture about him where he's always, you know, I penetrate pop culture, bring him a lot closer to the block where they live with their moms, like this. That's he sort of has a strategy always. He has a blueprint for what he's doing, and where Marshall Mathers, bless his heart, he sort of finds himself in this position. And it is, since I'm in the position to talk to these kids and they listen, I ain't no politician, but I kick it with them a minute. So you find that somehow, as this old world structure of what's that about, like the twin towers of capitalism, and that old crusader conflict of the Arabs all of a sudden coming back and smashing the new world capital, and center of the world, and bringing that to a fall. And at the same time, sort of the collective consciousness is bringing these people into awareness, and sort of pushing some buttons that are uh, animating people, showing them other sides of reality. And that is something that the collective consciousness is always doing. It's in this dialogue with itself, and it can be very helpful to trace it in celebrity, for instance. I couldn't name you a Taylor Swift song, but I could tell you, because I know that she's kind of that person at the moment who's the golden person. Uh, I can tell you that a part of what she's fulfilling is she's kind of the first female superstar to have like a normal vibe about her. Like she's not Madonna. She doesn't have to constantly play to extremity or something. She actually, like, to me, she seems like Dolly Parton without, again, sort of the extremities that might also be considered to Saint Dolly, like who doesn't love Dolly Parton, but just to say, notice like these figures who come in and empower and and act as weird role models and activations, and openers of horizons for entire generations and groups of people. But the horrible thing is when you do this, of course, as an individual, because for most individuals, we just operate through these small stories of ourselves that sort of make our manifestations and creations go from day to day. But if you manage to turn yourself from Carter into JC, and certainly his wife, who's a bigger star than he is, right? Then all of the sudden you become royalty. And the only thing royalty does, I can say, from a monarchy, is they try to keep up appearances. That they just try to not make any kind of faux pas or mistakes or anything that will um, get people to point at the throne, because it's kind of that idea where all of the sudden, once you've entered the collective consciousness, because that's a higher level of creation than you are personally, it begins to define your reality. And it can be quite an unpleasant shock, is my impression, from people who become famous, of course, because it's of course, like, it's super weird that people relate to you as something that you're not, but is actually a creation that you made. And then to sort of cap it off and share it, because I think this is a fun realization. um like, conservative systems uh, that belong to an older social order, like monarchies, for instance, have some of these structures of where to put the negative energy, because the positive energy is unevenly distributed. So you may be aware that, there's the Prince of Wales. He has a little brother who wrote a book called Spare, because he's of course number two, and he feels it's kind of hard that he doesn't get to be king. And over here in the second village, there's a castle that our number two, whose older brother, just got to be king, and that was also kind of emotional for the Danish egregore. But that guy, he has a castle he inherited, and then he sold it because, oh, I just get the castle, I won't get to be king. And now he's selling arms in Washington. So he's also an easy dude to dislike. But it's interesting that when I meet people like the old folks over at the nursery home, it's safe as a conversational topic to just assume that everybody hates that guy. And it's not his wife and his kids and everything are off limits, but that guy, we don't like him. And we like the king, and we certainly like their mother, the now abdicated queen. But that guy, number two, he's just no good, an easy guy to hate. And isn't it fascinating how a system will set up like a fall guy in that position? Because those are possibly, it must be a very small club of people who find that that's a reasonable complaint. Like, you were born into extreme privilege. You were literally born a prince, which is something that very few people can can claim that they have been. And yet you kind of feel cheated, like reality just pulled a fast on one. You never got to be king. And for everybody else, of course, it, like, seriously, dude, I think you can be happy that life gave you more than your inborn skills would have gotten you. Because I think Harry seems like a perfectly nice guy, but he also seems like the kind of guy who might give you a good deal on a refrigerator if you swing by his hardware store on Saturday or something. Like, more like a salt of the earth type of person than somebody you'd think, okay, here's the here's your Julius Caesar or Napoleon, some whatever, like really natural royalty, right? So in that way, I think it just is so fascinating that we perceive ourselves to be these kind of individual systems, but in reality, like, there's all these massive configurations about who we are and what's moving through us and what role we fulfill in the great puzzle that we're all a part of, and on how we awaken and become one and create the mystery and make it real, so it becomes less mysterious and more marvelous to gawk at. With that, I think it is time to turn it over to our friend Carlo from the Essassani. And it's partially because, Sunday live stream with the IEL, so what's up with the hybrid program? But it's also what is it about dreaming and reality? And what is a person from their perspective? So, with that, much love, guys. Hi there. A good day to you. I go by the name Carlo, but though I have other names when they are spoken in other ways of expressing themselves. Because to us, language is just a part of a wider framework of reality. So each individual statement that a human makes is much like a node in a wider composition for us. And every human lifetime is much as a melody that's played that leads up to the symphonic unfolding of the theme. So these are some of the images that we have often been bringing to you in different ways. And that is what we try to seek to convey, is that all these things are already within you. We are already within you. We are you and you are us. And that is difficult to understand, we know. But it is a part of these rotations of life. And so you will find that the Merkaba itself, the structure that you usually depict as two intersecting triangles forming the structure that you know as the Star of David, well, try to think of these as actual four-dimensional constructs that are, by their movement and the tension that they generate within this fundamental energy center of your chest, they are generating a type of harmony of differences that's both compressing and processing the vibrancies it receives from structures from the outside, but then takes these structures and compresses them and expresses them in a universally singular way. So when we have been saying, refer to some of my dear counterparts that you know, but when we have been saying that you create your own reality and that you are a complete universe unto yourself, it is exactly because all of these vibrations that you take in are individual remix of the entirety. And these individual remakes, they are made up of these tension fields that are generated between two intersecting yet invisible forces. And you are becoming more and more aware that consciousness itself is actually what generates time, and what generates consciousness is the phenomenon you call quantum entanglement. But the phenomenon you call quantum entanglement is essentially the fundamental tension that exists both in the point of creation and the point of completion of existence at large, but that's playing itself out in more and more complex ways. So it's if you think of a thing that's simultaneously repelling and attracting itself, and you are very aware of this on an emotional frequency, though your words are unable to map it out. But if you think of this and come into this as an emotional frequency, say love would be a way of approaching it, you would find that this frequency has this unbearable quality of getting closer and closer to itself, and with that generating higher and higher tensions. And with these higher and higher tensions, it then actually has to create smaller and smaller spaces where reality is folded into. So you often have an idea that the upper dimensions, as we should climb upwards, that is, if you climb upwards up the scale of numbers, you will also climb outwards. That is, you will climb out to this vastness of space that you see beyond your planet. But in reality, you're climbing inwards. You're climbing into denser fractals that can hide themselves within these wider fractals. And the reason that you're so impatient with everything, the reason that you find this world of differences to be quite unbearable, is because it's not different enough. And the emotional residue that that often generates for you is the feeling that you call boredom. So that's the feeling that there's a quality of sameness that you would like to have replaced with interplay, but that you're unable to attain or establish yourself because you're not tapped into the frequency grid that allows for this. And of course, the instruction has been for a long time then to learn to adjust to the frequencies of nature. And it still is. So there are rhythms, breath, there are heavens, the moon and the sun, there are spheres, the planets and the stars that all move and affect you and that you can tune into. But as you become a denser and denser fractal, all of these have so strong energetic interplays that it becomes very hard for you to discern where is the influence from one, where's the causality, and where is the massive interplay of the all. And this is delightful for you to experience when these differences are tense and tight enough. And you will, of course, also experience the same built into your physiognomy. So, the very type of energy phenomenon that you call orgasm that's built into your bodily structures is a type of concentration of tension that's seeking its release, but at the same time enjoying the releases escape from the two actually meeting. And so you will find that this climactic dance that you're entering into at the moment, it does have a type of orgasmic, almost unbearable quality to the collective consciousness because it's breaking itself into a new point of creation. So it's actually attaining this type of orgasmic freneticism. And at that point, you may notice that this is also a point within the human structure where personality seems to cease and break away for a moment to be replaced by a type of universal connection that then, by its unification of different layers, creates new life, new reality, and new emotional bubbles, realities, frequencies, possibly of a higher alchemized nature, also between the people who connect in this. So understanding again that these phenomenon then that you are experiencing, solar flares, solar eclipses, planetary alignments, supermoons, all these things seem to be so condensed now that the energy intensity becomes the actual reading that you can get. And that is in and of itself diffuse, it's confusing, it's impossible to put exact words to. And we find that even our friend here, who is a happy word putter, he enjoys working these things out and in his little smithy of his mind to try to see if it's possible to give them a shape that's comprehensible. But he's also finding that the swirls and meanderings of energy are so complex that they're very hard to unify. But what happens at this point is that there will then be deeper patterns of personality that emerges. And this is where you find that so many of you weren't really what you were named, and you weren't really whatever individual you grew up to be. You weren't really your profession or your job, your experiences, your words, your idea of yourself. You turned out to be something wholly mysterious, something that is attractive, noteworthy, strange, and a puzzle even to yourself. And to our friend here, it has assumed the quality of becoming this Mandion, this word that he came upon. And for you, it might be that you all of a sudden see your true face in the mirror, or you understand what was the connection, what was the personality that already lived in the eternal and has stepped into time to go back home from that scenic route where everything appears so precious and magical. And with that, I, Carlo of the Essassani, I give you our unconditional love, our acceptance, our support. We appreciate you. Farewell, dear humans. I hope there was something in there that you could take home and enjoy. Much love to you guys.